lunch break. So, anyways, so I think, what excites me about this opportunity to engage with providers is, really trying to develop a shared language around like nature access. I mean, I think the world of medical professionals is so different from those of us in like a community-based organization. Yet our outcomes and what we're striving for are definitely similar, and we share that. And so, where we've seen some success is we've really looked at, partnering with the American Academy of Pediatrics, to really look at, um, they were really interested in kind of the 0 to 3 and 0 to 5 population and looking at like nature connection or park access, in that early childhood, range, and really seeing that as an opportunity to look at both mental health outcomes and physical health outcomes. And so I feel like we have, just by even starting the conversation and understanding where they are at in terms of, you know, this idea of park equity was really helpful for us to start framing what type of talking points or um, resources we needed to develop in order to facilitate that type of discourse. Was there a question I was supposed to ask you, Laurie?
I don't know. I think we'll just be free flow. um, so, how have you seen COVID-19 kind of affect your work in general, and also in your partnership with the AP and in working with medical providers?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because primarily, I've been working on kind of green schoolyards as this way to like equitably connect children to nature. And prior to COVID and school closures, what we really saw is, I think, more of a hesitancy and less of a priority, in this space. And so now, with it, and also seeing for us as an organization, seeing kind of green schoolyards as an opportunity to like really maximize the schoolyard space and what can be done on that space, especially because children are spending so much time at school, and also seeing that as like even kind of a wellness opportunity for like staff and faculty at the school. And so now that we've kind of been in this pandemic and schools closed, I felt like administrators have really had an ear, and are eager to engage in this work. And so I've participated in the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative, where we really see green schoolyards as an opportunity to really play up outdoor learning opportunities. And also as a climate mitigation. So as people are trying to return to in-person instruction, and what does that look like, really seeing their school grounds, right? Like not just indoor and getting proper ventilation or what have you indoors, but also seeing outdoors as an opportunity. And that's just such a great turning point. I mean, like, but it's also, it's rough because I think schools have they always have had competing priorities, right? And so now you have like the whole school model kind of turned upside down. And so, I understand that so many school districts are really grappling with how to do this right. And I think we've also seen the opportunity to develop resources to help facilitate that process and develop like some peer opportunities where they can learn from peers across the country who are having some success in piloting some of these efforts. And then lastly, I'll just say that, I think we discussed this when we were preparing for this, but we have seen across the country our parks and trails and so many spaces, like people are hungry to like connect with the natural world. I mean, when it seemed like everything is being taken away from you, what felt like a natural place for people to go was to engage in kind of parks and open spaces and in green spaces. And I think that just really telling, and it's just a marker of like how we're naturally wired. We are meant to like engage in the outdoors and have this access.
Yeah, that's huge. And I know there are a lot of like, my daughter went to outdoor wild preschool. And I was really disappointed to know that real schools don't have much of that outdoor component. So I'm hoping that something that comes out of this COVID-19, shelter in place, hopefully increase green schoolyards and increase access to just the outdoors become a real priority for our school system.
Yeah, and I know one of the things that we had talked about is like what are kind of the policy opportunities, related to kind of increasing the movement. And I just want to elevate a couple of things. Both you and I had spoken about the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights as kind of this document or statement that really San Francisco has one. I believe Oakland might have one, and the state of California has a really broad one. But I mean, it's really this opportunity, this kind of policy statement that can do two things. One, it's just a statement that says children basically have the right to the outdoors, to bike, to swim, to fish, to, hike, to explore, to learn. And that can be as specific to your community as you want it. So if you want to name the specific lake or body of water, I think that's such a great opportunity. I think the more specific you can be, the better. But it also allows, in my opinion, this opportunity to hold kind of city departments somewhat like they can see themselves, their role inside the document, right? So if you're like, children should have the right to bike safely to these parks, right? Then that calls on the transportation department, who's working on some active transportation plans, to really see themselves, to kind of like, how can we help facilitate this, through this Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights. And so I think that's been something that's really interesting to kind of, for city departments to really, or agencies to really see themselves having a role in kind of ensuring that, the outdoors are really amenable for children, and that we're giving them that edict to like move forward.
Yeah, I love that. We're working on a Santa Clara County Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights right now for just that reason, just to really use it as a way to engage the residents of the community, but also really stakeholders and policymakers to really make those changes. I think the San Francisco Outdoor Bill of Rights was one of the things that helped drive their Park 10 Minutes from Every Home program, and they were the first city to implement that. Have you seen other initiatives that have come out of the Outdoor Bill of Rights, like policy changes that that you've seen that other cities or states that have developed them have had?
Yeah, so there's I mean, I think one of the spaces that California does well is in the active transportation program. So really looking at the opportunities to increase walking and biking safely in communities. And so even out of that kind of safe routes to school, which is really about ensuring children are able to walk or bike safely to school. But born out of that movement is also the safe routes to parks. And so, really looking at park access and the opportunity to ensure that children and their families, right, are able to kind of get to these spaces by walking, rolling, scootering, whatever, biking, there safely. And so I think that's such a nice pairing of like transportation and park planners, right, to like really look at the access to the space, and ensuring that it can be not just like, oh, we're going to build a parking lot and whoever can drive here, so it's just like really expanding that thinking of who's able to access the space and how. And obviously just like even the idea of biking to your local park and then spending time in that, it's like mentally and physically, it's like you're checking so many boxes, right? It's just like, just by reimagining and thinking, on the city or the, region's kind of behalf of like, okay, if we plan better, then people will utilize and function in these spaces, differently. So that's one policy opportunity. Mike mentioned earlier about kind of my shared use experience. I've been working in that space for quite a while, over a decade, around really opening up school grounds to the community after school hours or during out of school time. So really seeing the school grounds as a amenity to a community, right? So even if a park isn't necessarily the safe space that community feels comfortable, usually schools are seen as a safer space for community to like congregate and get physical activity. So I think California has a long history with some state level shared use policies coming from the school board. But then Oakland also adopted some great policy, not only around the shared use, but they included it in curriculum at the school board level and also in the facilities, which is really important because often in schools, like curriculum and facilities, people aren't always communicating with one another, but it's like, if you just had the conversation, you could just make such a much more maximum impact. And then, so safe routes to parks, safe routes to school, cool, children outdoors, Bill of Rights, shared use. I think those are kind of like cover the park equity, kind of the policies, I think. Yeah, I think those are my notes.
Forget the mute. I was just wondering for both of you, I mean, we've talked about schools and cities, but I'm wondering about other partners that you guys would like to use or work with or have been able to successfully work with. And I'm thinking anything from the business community to different CBOs in the community. I'm just wondering who have been strong partners that you've worked with in the past or that you would recommend working with or that you would hope to work with.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of success working with nonprofits in our community that serve our population, my patient population. Like we partnered with an organization called Vegilution, which is in San Jose, and they're a community garden. But we partnered with them in terms of addressing food insecurity because they allow us to give our patients coupons, and then the patients can go to the community garden and get free produce. But we also partnered with them in terms of physical activity, helping our families connect with them to work on the farm. They have a small children's garden, and so the children can go there and they can work and actually harvest vegetables on the farm. And the parents can also work in the larger farm if they want to do that. And also they have a lot of programs like yoga in the farm, and so we partnered with them to try to connect our families more with them because it really does combine like multiple layers, like you said about the park access and safe routes to school. It combines, food equity concepts and being active and just having, more control of their food sources. So that's been one really successful program that we've partnered with. How about you, Mikaela? Do you have any other ideas around that concept?
I love partnering with universities. It's like one of those partners I always like. I'm like, include them in your conversation, right. Because there's always like some research opportunity that they're already kind of potentially mulling over, or you can expand that. So I love that, to include them in conversations around different initiatives. And then the faith-based community is so critical, I think, when you're especially trying to like work on health stuff. I mean, so many faith-based institutions have like health ministries or what have you. And so sometimes just like meeting people where they are. And I think Alana talked about this kind of earlier in her opening remarks, but I think, again, we're trying to work towards like that similar goal, but sometimes you can't expect people to come to you. But if you're able to like forge a bridge and, have a conversation with like faith-based institutions and kind of what are they seeing in their congregation? Can I come in and give a talk, about some of these efforts? I think that's really proves to be very valuable, because that's just the other kind of pillar in many communities that is seen as respected and non-threatening and all the things that people really want to take advantage of. So
yeah,
Mikaela, you brought up something really interesting. You said bring people too, but I think for a lot of low-income communities, sometimes transportation is a real challenge getting to open spaces and parks and so forth. Have either of you have suggestions on how to address some of the transportation challenges or partnerships that might help invite more communities to use open spaces and parks?
Yeah, transportation's the trickiest piece. I think that's one of the reasons why the safe routes to parks kind of movement in terms of policy is so important. For our program, we got a huge grant. We've actually gotten 2 grants now to help allow us to provide transportation for their families to the parks. But it's an ongoing struggle for the families who aren't in our program. Just getting to the parks is really one of the biggest barriers that keeps them from accessing the parks that they really want to access. So I think grants are a great way. Policy in terms of that's the piece we're trying to figure out in terms of transit and working on policy changes. I know Oakland has their Shine program, their park prescription program, and they've partnered with their park community, and the park community has a bus, and so they can transport their patients with that bus. Our program uses a taxi service, which is why it's a little bit more expensive. So I think there are options out there, like different programs have buses. I know Oakland used to have a Head Start bus. And so there are potentially other options out there in the community. If you can find those partners that have access to transportation, you might be able to leverage those partnerships to provide transportation for your families.
Yeah, I think the examples that you shared are great. And I also think that like in LA County, we have a pretty large, it's like state owned, but county operated like park. And it has so many different amenities like a lake and all of these different things. And you would want, every community member to be able to take advantage. And so I know that there are funds allocated to some of those larger regional parks where they have, similar to what you were saying, Laurie, like a shuttle that will shuttle families specifically on the weekend to just like come and take advantage of this park and open space. So it seems like a really good option. And then the other thing I was thinking about is I know there's the Every Kid in a Park campaign, which is kind of this national campaign that allows every 4th grader like a free park pass or passport to national parks. And it's just like, it's such a, I just remember a few years ago, my daughter was in 4th grade and I was like, this is such a great way to introduce a family to like some of our national parks and really removes that barrier of cost, at least on park entry, right? I mean, you still have to figure out how to get there, but I think just like that introduction of, saying, oh, well, I have this and kids are such the gateway, right? So like the adults and, their ability to be adaptive. To see something adapted to kind of a more regional or like county based, something where, there are like these park passes that kids can get